You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Week in Review, the show that reveals facts, truth, research, and statistics and never messes around. We lay down the entire truth about everything regarding your Detroit and Michigan sports teams, no matter if it's good or bad. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no coddling, no pop culture, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website at MichiganSportsTruth.com and like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth. The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
Episode 302 is now in session, the Week in Review edition on Spreaker, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio, the Michigan Sports Truth podcast. Come on. There we go. Taylor Phillips and Buck Geno. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips. And follow Buck Geno on Twitter at BuckGeno III, 3 I's for Roman numerals. Buck, Super Bowl 52 was amazing, but it happened to be a slugfest, but we're going to get to that later. We got other topics to segue through, including the one we're going to kick off this year. Kick off this week. Apologize for getting carried away by Moss's latest tweet. But let's get to the Larry Nassar scandal aftermath. There were a few more bullet points that followed up after last week. Magic Johnson calls for accountability at Michigan State University in the wake of the sexual abuse scandal by Larry Nassar. And then Michigan State University hires former Michigan Governor John Engler. Students interrupt a board meeting to protest over it. One of them standing on a table but speaking politely over a board meeting. And then you got Travis Walton denying sexual assault allegations when outside the lines revealed everything, including Travis Walton and one other basketball player, Adrian Payne, I think was the other one that joined Walton in a 2-on-1 sexual assault affair on the main basketball court. And then earlier this morning, Nassar himself being sentenced to an additional 40 to 125 years in Eaton County, totaling up to 140 years minimum to 360 years maximum.
Holy jumping!
So, yeah, this thing just, the hits keep coming.
Right. I mean, you have all these things coming out, and it's just, you're going to have to wade through it. And it's the same thing I said last week. You're going to have to wade through it. You're going to have to wait until all the facts are presented, or at least all the facts that are available are presented. And then they're going to have to make a decision, they being the NCAA, they being Big Ten, they being whoever is in the Michigan State Board of Trustees at the time the investigation is concluded. The one thing I'll say about all of it is that it continues to be a theme that Mark D'Antonio has been the most outspoken of the two coaches between he and Tom Izzo. And Tom Izzo has repeatedly refused to answer questions. Some will take that as admission of guilt. Some will take that as being evasive. Others will say that he's waiting for all of the facts before he can make a statement. What I find hard to believe is that he doesn't have enough facts at hand to some more light to the questions that have been asked. I'm not asking that he answer in detail every question that gets thrown his way, because that would be irresponsible. But I can't believe that he wouldn't be able to answer anything. And that's really wherein lies the rub, as William Shakespeare would say, because Mark D'Antonio doesn't feel like he needs to hide anything. And he's been pretty out in the open. He's had some, I would say, his copyright George Bush misrememberments of different, or Roger Clemens, I should say, misremembering some incidents in history as far as reporting sexual assault. But I think that over the course of what has happened since the Larry Nassar case has become the public spectacle that it has been, I think that Mark D'Antonio has been more outspoken and more upfront than Tom Izzo. And to me, that doesn't say that Tom Izzo is necessarily hiding anything. It just speaks to me that there is more confidence with Mark D'Antonio as to what his program has gone through and the transparency that is there. Now, have they been perfect? No. There's been a clear line of misdoings and bad deeds within the football program that have gone unpunished. But I think that Mark D'Antonio has gotten better as he has progressed as the Michigan State head coach. I used to think back in the early days of when he was first hired, I thought he was a terrible disciplinarian. And there is a very clear path that you can show the different things that he failed to take action on. And I think that he regrets that, and he made some poor decisions at that time, and I think he has changed. Now, do I think that he's a part of this massive cover-up at Michigan State University and a culture of sexual assault being tamped under the rug? That is still out for the jury to decide. But I think that the one thing that speaks out to me this week about this whole topic, without diving into every detail, I think that Mark D'Antonio being more outspoken and Tom Izzo being very blunt, abrupt, and silent about the questions that have come his way, I think is, I don't want to say it's a disservice to his school and his team, but I think that the more that it happens, the more he's going to bring on his team. And I understand where he's coming from. He's trying to shield his team from any outside distractions, but I think the time for that has passed. I think that barn, that the cow has gotten out of that barn, and I think that he needs to at least come forward and give some statement based on what he knows and what he's able to tell at that time. And he still has to be pretty measured in his comments. But I think that he's got more than what he's giving, which is nothing. And I think that speaks to me right there that there's something that he wants to address, or maybe he doesn't want to have come out at this time. And it only gives credence to the fanboys on the message boards and the rumor mongers and the muckrakers, because if you don't say anything, all it does is gives them a license, albeit a warped one, to make up their own conclusions. And until he comes out and says something regarding all of these issues, he's going to have to take it. Maybe he's just doing that. Maybe he's deflecting it away from the players and making it all about him. Coaches will do that. But I think that, number one, there's two factors. Number one, he's in the throes of his season, working to find the Big Ten title and another NCAA berth, whereas Mark D'Antonio right now, he's got all his players signed. He doesn't have to worry about signing day number 2. And for that matter, he's not even into spring ball yet. So obviously there's a clear delineation as to which coach has more time to make these statements and think about what he's going to say before he makes them. But on the other hand, I think that Tom Izzo, while he doesn't owe it to fans to say something, I think he owes it to his university to come out and say at least something. I really wouldn't even be dissatisfied with something as little as, there's really not much for me to talk about. When the time comes, that there'll be a time where we can talk about this, and I want to get all my ducks in a row. But to dismiss the people that are asking him these types of questions, I understand he's in the middle of basketball season. He doesn't want to answer these, but again, that cow's been out of the barn for a while. You're going to have to answer some of these questions, and just pushing them to the side just to get to your basketball questions, it just leaves too much to the imagination in the age we live in. that's not a good thing. And I think that as time goes on, maybe after their season's done, he'll come out and make a stronger statement, because a lot of people in the Michigan State community seem to think that this ESPN Outside the Left report was a hit piece. It was something that was designed to get clicks, views, ratings, whatever, and it came out timed too conveniently with all the rest of the things that were going on. Sometimes facts are mean, and sometimes they don't want to put stuff out until they know that they can do that. And sure, ESPN's a business. They're not going to put this out in July when nobody's paying attention. They're going to put it out when the most eyes are going to be available to see it. But that said, that doesn't mean that they're doing the rest of the investigative reporting and then waiting for this to happen. They did all this and wrapped it up in August. And the people that think that there's some witch hunt going on, if this was going to be a witch hunt, they would have put it down the first day they wrapped up. As soon as they were done, they would have put it in the can and thrown it on the TV, on their app, everywhere they could put it. They didn't. They waited. So to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would you wait on something that you have a potential bombshell of a story? Why would you wait 4 months to release it? It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're a business as far as having that stuff and just waiting for it in the can. In today's social media age, you can't sit on stuff. You have to get rid of it and get it out there before anybody else can. Otherwise, you're too late. So all of that said, I think that, again, that goes back to what we said last week. Time will tell. And to read into the tea leaves on a lot of this stuff is just way too difficult. It also is an exercise in futility, because until we get all the information that he's had, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be guessing. And to guess on something like this is not in the position you want to be.
No, guessing is what we don't do on the Michigan Sports Truth. It's like making wild predictions and wild guesses and whatnot. We'll just have to see what happens. And there are a lot of deflections machines out there, including Izzo, Walton, D'Antonio themselves, especially during the basketball season and during spring football. But also want to point out, I don't think it should be up to the media to investigate the entire thing. It's supposed to be the prosecutors and the legal crew, the detectives and whatnot, to bring it to the media so they can report it. So I don't blame the media for that.
Well, no, and the thing is, when you're talking about a situation like Michigan State, you look at other cases like Baylor and Penn State. I mean, obviously the lines of communication were broken, and they were well past the point of repair. So there are times where we lean on the media to give us that information that maybe should have been disseminated before. There's other times where we kind of have to wait until the powers that be give us that information. There's a balance, and I think that when you look at what the facts are that are being dredged up by this report, the Nassar case, and then the other things, there's a clear pattern of sweeping things under the rug, of making things smaller than they really need to be, not making a big deal about certain things. So, well, I think that you're going to have to wait until all the facts are there. It's pretty evident that it's going to take some people some action to get those facts, because they're not being distributed willingly, or at least they're not being distributed in good faith. I mean, look at the FOIA requests that ESPN had, that they sued Michigan State University and lost twice to get the full copies of the documents that they had requested. Michigan State University sent them documents with names, with dates, with parts of the story redacted. I mean, if it's the Freedom of Information Act, why are you taking things out of there? They're not minors. And it's a state-run and federally funded institution. So the Freedom of Information Act clearly states you have to send them things if they have a reasonable request. And they're sending them documents that don't have the whole story. So these facts have to be unearthed by somebody. And I think that ESPN obviously has their own motivation outside of getting the story. Obviously, it makes them money and gets them exposure and all those other things. But you have to be able to delineate between journalism and, like they've called it before, a witch hunt. And right now, it doesn't seem like a witch hunt to me if they're asking for the information.
Mm-hmm. So, that's pretty much all we know at the moment. So we'll just leave all that there and transition to college basketball and the Spartans themselves.
Valentine for the win!
They turned the ball over 15 times last week at home against the Penn State Nittany Lions and trailed 30 to 24 at half time. But they came back. They usually start slow in the first half and then come back in the second half to find a way to win. They did so 76-68 over the Penn State Nittany Lions, who aren't necessarily that great of a basketball team, to say the least. And then they go to Indiana and shoot 8 of 17 from the free throw line.
You are pathetic!
And they still win 63-60 against another, to say the least, bad team, the Indiana Hoosiers. The Spartans just barely held on in Bloomington at Assembly Hall. And now they're ranked 4th in the AP poll rankings. That's crazy.
Well, it goes to show you that really what college basketball is just a merry-go-round in the rankings this year. I mean, really, Villanova's the only team that has proven to be any sort of consistent over the balance of the season. Everybody else is just kind of revolving door. And for Michigan State to be ranked 4th, obviously a lot of things had to happen above them as well. But they won 2 games. And right now, I mean, just based on the record that they have, it makes sense. But obviously the eye test, when you're looking at the number 14 beating Penn State, having to come from behind to beat Penn State at home, and then surviving against Indiana, who, even though they're a 500 team, you're playing them on the road. It's a big time game. That doesn't smell like number 14 to me. But as I said before, college basketball is literally a merry-go-round in the AP Top 25 poll this year. And the thing I'll say about the Indiana game, the Penn State game, there's a lot of things going on, and they didn't start well. And neither did they. They didn't really start well against Indiana, but they had an 8-point lead at half. And then the second half came, and they had just enough in the tank to pull that one out. That Indiana game, you go 8 for 17 from the foul line, turning the ball over at inopportune times, but they were able to get the job done. And, it goes to show just this year in college basketball has been it's just been impossible almost to predict, simply because teams show up in multiple different personalities every game. And you look at the schedules and the times they play them and who the teams are, and you look at that and sometimes you're just like, how does this team lose to that team but then beat another ranked team? I mean, that's kind of the story of college basketball in a nutshell, is you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, Michigan State, for all the big wins they've had, has had some real scares against teams that are inferior to them, and has a couple losses to teams that they're inferior to. The inferior team won. So they survive, and really when it comes down to it, this last stretch run here before it gets to the Big Ten and the NCAA tournament, I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be fighting for those bids, and their resumes are going to look like dog crap because they're going to have bad losses and good wins on them. And it's going to be up to the committee to sort through all that and find the 68 best teams outside of the automatic bids to fill out that field. And it's going to be one of the tougher jobs the committee has had, both in seeding and in just filling that field. Because there's a lot of teams that can claim that they have big wins against some teams, and those same teams are going to have some bad losses. So it really just becomes an exercise in that eye test, seeing the team played and how they got to where they're at. So Michigan State tomorrow plays at Iowa, and then they have a big game Saturday at home against the third-ranked Boilermakers in a rematch of the earlier game they had. And, like I said, it's something that it's impossible to predict right now. I mean, they could go to Iowa and lose by 15. They could also go and win by 20. I mean, it is literally an up-and-down season for pretty much every team in college basketball. So I think that Michigan State, while they have the chops to be a top 5 team, they need to prove it. And they'll have a chance to do so on Saturday. But they also have to play against Iowa at Iowa. And it is a ridiculously hard place to play, regardless of who it is and what Iowa's record is. It's just not a great place to play a road game. And they've got 2 games coming up that are really going to show the rest of the college basketball world where they're at right now. And for Michigan State, they're going to have their hands full.
Yeah, Iowa's been a really, really bad team, especially at home. They got almost routed. They got almost routed, but still beat pretty bad by the Michigan Wolverines in Iowa City. Right in the beginning of January of last month, and then Purdue came in and just routed the snot out of Iowa. The Hawkeyes, man, oh man, they lost to Ohio State at home.
Right. I mean, they've lost to some good teams at home, and you talk about having to try to win at Iowa. I mean, still not a great place to play, but you look at their schedule, and they've lost a lot of great games at home. And so,
especially in the Big Ten.
On paper, you're saying, boy, this should be an easy game for Michigan State. They should be able to go right in there and take this one from Iowa. But that's the danger, is you can't go in there overconfident, because
right.
I think that Michigan State had a little bit of that going into the Indiana game, and it almost came to cost them.
Yeah, especially that free throw shooting.
Right. I mean, you shoot 8 for 17 in a conference road game. I don't know how you win, but they did it. And I think that to say that Michigan State's got an easy game against Iowa, like I said, on paper, yeah, it is going to be an easy game for them. But they don't play the games on paper, and it's going to be real tough to get those kids to realize that they're going to have to come to play. I think the Indiana game is at least something that Tom Izzo can point to his squad and say, hey, if you take these guys lightly, it's not going to be a fun time for you. And when you're talking about Iowa, right, they don't have a great record. They're not a team that can blow you out of the water offensively. But again, they can try to make it a slugfest. They can try to use their home court advantage. And if Michigan State comes out flat, Iowa is one of those teams that at home, regardless of how they played, it's still a place that they can use their home court advantage to their benefit. And again, it's college basketball this year. There's just no way to predict what's going to happen with any sort of regularity, because every time you think you got it cornered, somebody loses a game that they shouldn't have, and now you're back at where you started trying to figure out who's where.
Mm-hmm. Also, may I note, with so many teams that beat Iowa in Iowa City, how embarrassing would it be for only Michigan State to lose at Iowa this season thus far?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a lot of great wins at home. They beat Wisconsin, who's real down this year. After that, they haven't had a lot of success at home in conference play. So, like I said, on paper, these games look slam dunk. They look like they're lead pipe cinch locks, but they got to play the game. And I think that the game against Indiana for Michigan State was a true lesson of that.
Right. So, speaking of the Michigan Wolverines,
For three, yes, sir.
they
The number 20th ranked.
Yep.
They jumped 4 spots.
After beating Northwestern 58-47, they started out trailing 14-5 to start the game, and then they led 21-19 at halftime. They came through to win by 11, and then they allowed a game-tying three-pointer with 5 seconds left in the second half to force overtime, and they still beat the Minnesota Golden Gophers 76-73. Michigan Wolverines survive a game-tying three. Duncan Robinson getting himself into double digits as of late. Muhammad Ali Abdul-Rahman continuing to do his thing. That's it. Michigan basketball rarely allows a game-tying three or any game-winning or tying basket at the end. They usually hang on, but I think whether maybe it's either a lack of defense or maybe just the Gophers hitting a contested three or something like that, or maybe blown coverage. I didn't even watch the game. I was at work. But
yeah, that Minnesota game was, again, it was real weird because you had Michigan with 2 games at home. First, they come out to play Northwestern, and they were just abysmal from the start. They ended up, like you said, starting down 14-5, then they made a long run, and then they were able to gain control after that point. But not the greatest effort against Northwestern, and they had Minnesota. They had them on the run for a little bit, but then Minnesota ended up with the halftime lead, and Michigan had to come back and take the lead. And then they gave it up, and then in overtime, Michigan finally was able to get some distance in between them to pull out the victory. If you look at the box score for that game, the 2 glaring spots, Isaiah Livers with only 5 points in a starting role, and Jordan Poole with 0 points, just not shooting the basketball well at all. They had to rely on the bench a little bit. Duncan Robinson came off the bench for some big minutes, got into double digits. But after that, they literally had no production from anybody else on the bench. No points other than Duncan Robinson off the bench. And that's just, when you look at those stats, it's the same thing as a free throw situation in Assembly Hall for Michigan State. When you talk about a game that you have literally one guy off your bench scoring any points, you think, how did they win that game? How did they come out on top when their bench didn't do anything to help them other than Duncan Robinson? But they somehow got it done. And it's so hard this year in college basketball to look at things and try to figure out what happened and why. But I would say that for Michigan, their upcoming schedule this week, they've got Northwestern in the rematch tomorrow at 7 p.m. And then they go to Wisconsin and play a team that arguably is doing much poorer than everybody had predicted. And again, you look at those 2 games on paper and you say, Michigan should win both of those games, and they should do with relative ease. But then you see what's going to happen. Michigan has not been shooting well at all lately. And when you're talking about a John Beilein team, if you're not hitting from the perimeter, that's death, because they don't have a lot of guys that can pick up the slack. Mo Wagner playing well, but you can't lean on him the entire game. You have to try to spread the basketball around a little bit. And I think if you're Michigan right now, you're happy that you're where you're at, but boy, you have not played to your potential. And that's to be said about a lot of teams.
One key,
they have not played They have not been able to play their potential. And if you're Michigan, boy, if you can get hot, and Michigan teams have done so in the past, when they get hot, they're a very tough team to handle. And right now, they're not shooting as well as they should be. Their defense has been mediocre to above average. But those are just games that, when you're talking about Northwestern and Wisconsin, that if you're losing those games, albeit on the road. You got to revisit some things. So hopefully they can get it put together and come out with 2 wins this week. But again, it would be foolhardy to say that those are automatics at this point of the season.
Yeah, you got to revisit those things anyway, even if you win. And one key factor to play to your potential is for this Michigan Wolverines men's basketball team to play as a team, not count on 1 or 2 individuals. You gotta bring the whole team together. Share the basketball, move it quicker, shoot more accurately, and do all that for an entire 40 minutes per game.
Yeah, and that's been really the elusive effort for them most of the season. I think their most complete effort to this point, which has resulted in a win, is probably the Michigan State game. If you look at the games that they've played in conference play, their best conference game probably was against Michigan State, and they ended up winning that game by 10 at the Breslin Center. Everything else has been barely getting by. They beat Maryland by a point. They went to Nebraska and got shellacked, and came home to play Rutgers and struggled with them. And then they went to Purdue and lost by 4. And down the stretch, that's the one thing if you're going to talk about basketball. Purdue, they're ranked number 3. And the one thing that I've been impressed with about as Purdue is concerned is when they get to the last 5 minutes of the game, they own those last 5 minutes. They are one of the better teams that coming down the stretch is able to hold a lead or get the lead from a team that has gone ahead and then make it stick. So I think that for Michigan, again, it's about, like you said, a team game, getting everybody involved and making it really tough for teams to defend them because when they're at their best, it's very hard to defend them because it could be anybody going off for a big night. So far, in the last couple of weeks, that really hasn't happened. But it could happen if they play to their potential.
They are at Northwestern tomorrow, Tuesday at 7 on BTN. And then they're at the Wisconsin Badgers Sunday at 1 on CBS. Michigan's really going to have to step it up on the road, especially at those Badgers. Even though the Badgers aren't as great as they used to be. Like, every team's usually good at home, except for Iowa.
Yeah, right. I mean, you look at Iowa, and traditionally they've been much better at home this year because they don't have a great team, and when you don't have a great team, the home court advantage can only take you so far, and we've seen that to this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but for Wisconsin, that's all pretty much a different story. The Badgers are tougher at home on their home court than the Hawkeyes are. Clearly, this year, they are.
Right.
So, to the MAC we go, the Mediocre American Conference. The Central Michigan Chippewas are catching up. They beat the Northern Illinois Huskies 81-67 at McGurk Arena. Josh Kaczynski led with 24 points. Yeah, 24 points, leading in scoring.
Oh, man.
And then they went into Athens, Ohio, and beat the Bobcats in double overtime, 101-98. Chippewas are really catching up in the MAC West standings. They're home against the Buffalo Bulls Tuesday at 7, and then at the Akron Zips Saturday at 2. They're playing a really tough Bulls team at McGurk Arena at home. That's going to be an interesting one. And then they have a very easy opponent on the road Saturday afternoon, mid-afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Buffalo, obviously the leaders in the MAC East, and playing very well. And it's going to be an interesting matchup for Central tomorrow. And then, as you said, going to Akron, they should win that game with relative ease. But in college basketball, the name of the game is we don't know what's going to happen. And right now, Central Michigan, they seem to have, at least for Central, I would say that defensively they improved in the Northern Illinois game. They were able to corral the Huskies and win that game. Then going to Ohio and playing against a team in Ohio that literally there's no bench in Athens. They have 5 stars and a couple guys that come in, and to take those guys to get taken to the wire by them, they were able to win that game. But boy, it was a bigger struggle than it should have been, especially since Ohio really is not that good of a team. But they were able to win that game in double overtime. Boy, through Central Michigan, giving up in regulation over 70 points again. Boy, it's just one of those odd things. And conference basketball is a completely different animal than anything else. And just another lesson in that, as they beat the Ohio Bobcats in double overtime, when it really on paper looks like they should have just been able to walk in there and come out with an easy victory.
Yeah. The Western Michigan Broncos went to Ypsilanti and beat the Eastern Michigan Eagles 71-57. And then they gave it a good fight at the Buffalo Bulls, but still lost by 6, 92-86. That was a good one. Hopefully for my Chippewas, they've been watching that video from Mid-American Conference Productions. Western's home against the Miami, Ohio Redhawks Tuesday at 7, and then home against the Ohio Bobcats Saturday at 4:30 at University Arena in Kalamazoo. Eastern Michigan, speaking of which, after losing to Western, they crushed the Ball State Cardinals 58-41 over the Ball State Cardinals. They're at least trying to avoid last place in the MAC West. They're at Kent State against the Golden Flashes Tuesday at 7, and then they're at the Bowling Green Falcons Saturday at 4. So that's a look at college basketball. Now we transition to pro basketball and the Pistons.
Left sideline 3, and he answers.
Let's get this top story out of the way. The Pistons trade Boban Marjanovic and Tobias Harris and Avery Bradley, a first-round draft pick and a second-rounder, to the Los Angeles Clippers for five-time NBA All-Star power forward Blake Griffin and 2 reserves, a power forward Bryce Johnson and center Willie Reed. Bryce Johnson, 1.8 points per game, 1.4 rebounds per game, and 0.2 blocks per game. Center Willie Reed, 4.9 points per game, 3.1 rebounds per game, 0.6 blocks per game. They're really just reserve statistics. The Pistons, in other words, don't really have a backup center. They just have reserves now.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Moore now thrust into that role, but the front court a little bit more crowded with the addition of Blake Griffin, trading Tobias Harris, and also Boban Marjanovic.
Damn it.
I think the one thing that surprised me was the first-round pick and the lack of protection that had. Stan Van Gundy really putting all his chips into the middle of the table on this season.
And Jeff Howard.
And they're only half a game out of the 8th spot. So they're really trying to make that playoff push, and so far it's looked to be a successful trade for them on the short end. On the long view, obviously Blake Griffin owed a lot more money than either Tobias Harris or Boban Marjanovic would have been able to net. The one thing is, I think people forgot a little bit, Tobias Harris was due for a contract after this season, and chances are somebody's going to make him a max player, and I just don't know if the Pistons are willing to spend that money. I think for the return that they got outside of Blake Griffin, that was pretty much just cannon fodder, cap room, cap space, whatever, to help out the Clippers. So it really was all 3 of those players in a first-round pick for Blake Griffin. And that's a big move to make when you're not in the playoffs and you don't have a lot of knowledge of what's going to happen after the season with not only your team, but Stan Van Gundy and Jeff Bauer. So they don't make the playoffs. It's going to be real tough for those guys to say that they're on the right path, just simply because drafting hasn't been great. They haven't been really utilizing the draft picks that they've had. at I would say an optimal level. You would hope that the guys that they've had in the last 3 years, while being at the top of or close to the lottery, it just seems like I said, they're putting all their chips in at the middle of the table for this season.
They're all in.
Trying to find out what happens next year. And with the free agent pool being what it is, it's relatively, I would say, thin, especially at the positions that we're going to talk about later. So I think that one of those key areas is for the Pistons, if they don't make the playoffs, you have to wonder what they're going to be able to do, because at this point, if you can't make the playoffs with the current cast that you have, and I know that Reggie Jackson is going to be still, an addition at some point when his injury is finally healed, we're really going to get to see what the Pistons have. And maybe they're banking on with the Blake Griffin addition and Reggie Jackson coming back, that they can make a real run. But again, they've dug themselves a hole with 2 lengthy losing streaks this year. And when you're talking about getting into the playoffs, you're talking about getting into the 7 or 8 spot. You're talking about playing the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series to start off your playoff run. And I know that the Pistons have had a limited success against the Cavaliers this year, but boy, that's just a real tough position to put yourself in. So we'll see where it lands them. I think that the trade overall for the Pistons was a good thing, because it did give them some room to start using some guys that they hadn't been using. But Stan Van Gundy really is putting a lot of weight on being able to make the playoffs this year. And so far, the returns have been good. But obviously, when Reggie Jackson comes back, that's when they'll be at full strength. And I think a lot of teams in the East at this point are hoping that they don't have to match up with them in the first round, simply because at full strength, if the Pistons are indeed playing to their potential, it's going to be a battle in their current state. It may not be as much, but as the playoffs run gets really into the stretch here with February and March, I just don't know if they have enough to make any noise in the NBA playoffs based on the performances they've had in those 2 losing streaks, and also playing against the teams that are the odds-on favorites to, again, perhaps advance to the NBA Finals, or if you're talking about the Boston Celtics, finally break through and get past the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, we'll talk about the grade for this trade later, but boy, it is really apparent that they wanted to make a big splash, and they went out and made it. And now they've made their bed, and they're going to have to lay in it for the rest of the season.
Yep. Since that Blake Griffin trade, the Pistons have been 4-0 thus far. They upset the Cleveland Cavaliers 125-114 at Little Caesars Arena. Now, Blake Griffin was not eligible to play, but the Pistons won without it anyway against the Cavaliers. Wow. And then they edged the Memphis Grizzlies 104-102 once Blake Griffin became eligible. He went 24, 10, and 5 dimes. They beat the Miami Heat 111-107. Griffin again almost had another triple-double, and they just steamrolled the Portland Trailblazers 111-91. Griffin 21, 9, and 6. 4 straight wins since that Griffin trade. 3-0 since he became eligible to play. Now,
I ran the Blazers out of the building tonight. I mean, that was just
yeah.
The Blazers just had no answer today. And the Pistons, even though they started slow offensively, still had a 6-point lead at halftime, and then they really turned on the Jets in the second half.
Kind of like the Michigan State Spartans, huh?
Yeah, right. I ran them out of the building in the second half and really just put some big distance between them. If you look at the box score again, that's not the whole story, but it is something to look at. As you mentioned, Blake Griffin with 21, 9, and 6. Drummond was 17 and 17.
Yep.
And then you had the bench, which came in big. Langston Galloway, who to this point of the season has really been invisible. Came off the bench for 13 points. Luke Kennard, 12 points off the bench. And Anthony Tolliver with 15 points. So the Pistons, again, getting some good contribution from the non-starters. Ish Smith started at point guard. He had 7 points, 7 assists. And you had Stanley Johnson starting at forward. He had 8 points and 4 rebounds. Not everybody can score 20 every night, but when you're getting 6 players in double figures, that's a good thing, obviously. And I think for the Pistons now, the key is going to be when they're playing some of those better teams, it's not going to be just about the offense, but it's also going to be about getting stops. Because, yes, they beat Cleveland in a relatively high-scoring affair, but I think that when they're playing those teams in March and April, it can be a different story. But again, no Reggie Jackson, so they don't really have a starting point guard that they can lean on. I know Ish Smith is taking the bulk of the minutes there, but he's not a starter in the NBA. Right now he is because of injury. But if he comes back, keeping Reggie Jackson and is able to give them some good minutes and some good defense, they could turn into something. But I think that ankle injury, and he's had a long layoff. They're going to have to get him back sooner rather than later to get him in rhythm. Just because at the point that they're going right now, they're going well. But again, it's going to be a lot different game than it is right now. And we'll see if they have the toughness and the defensive edge to be able to beat some of the elite teams in the East.
The Portland Trailblazers, I just looked it up, are still 29-25, 6th place in the West. They've lost 3 straight, though. They're kind of in a funk right now. The Pistons took advantage of that, delivered that knockout punch to keep them in check in the second half, like you mentioned before, after a bit of a slow or chippy first half. They started out fresher in the second half and just finished them right off.
Yeah, I mean, the front court didn't do a whole lot for the Trailblazers. El-Farouq Aminu had 13 boards but only 9 points. Mo Harkless with no rebounds and only 6 points. And then Yusuf Nurkic with only 10 points and 5 boards. So Pistons obviously winning the rebounding battle, and that's something they're going to have to do. And that also goes back to the defensive play. If you're getting the rebounds, clearing the glass with guys like Griffin and Drummond, that's when you can control the tempo. That's when you can set the pace for the game. And for the Pistons, that's going to be their biggest hurdle, I feel, going into the stretch run, is can they get defensive stops? Can they control the glass? And can they set the pace for their own liking against some of the better teams?
They're home against the Brooklyn Nets Wednesday at 7. They lost to the Nets last time they met, which was at Little Caesars Arena, but with Blake Griffin on their side, the Pistons are going to do, in my crystal ball, much better against the Nets. As they seek revenge Wednesday at 7, and then they're home against who else but the LA Clippers, Tobias Avery and Boban Marjanovic Friday at 7. How poetic would that matchup be? And then Sunday at 3:30, they finally hit the road at the Atlanta Hawks at Phillips Arena. And then they're coming back home next Monday, February 12th, 2 days before Valentine's Day at 7 against the New Orleans Pelicans.
Yeah, and then you're looking at the schedule in the long view. They've got some games that you would think that they'd have a distinct advantage in. 2 games with the Hawks, 1 game with the Nets. Pelicans, who they usually play pretty close to the vest with. Valentine's Day, they have a home date with the Hawks, but then they have a long layoff because of the All-Star break. Their first game after the All-Star break coming back is going to be against the Boston Celtics. So the measuring stick is really going to come to bear after the All-Star break, because they have the Celtics, and they have the Hornets, and then they have the Raptors, the Milwaukee Bucks. Those are some games that they're going to have to come out and play well, because they're going to start to play some teams that they need to jump ahead of or stay ahead of. And those are going to be some games that really going to see where the Pistons are at this point of the season.
Yeah, just looked at the Atlanta Hawks. They're still just barely the worst team in the NBA. It's 16-37, just a half game behind the Orlando Magic and the Sacramento Kings for a three-way tie, for what could be a three-way tie for worse in the NBA still. But man, I can't wait to see how the Pistons do with Blake Griffin the rest of the schedule. That's gonna be another one of our 5 questions later on. But let's transition to hockey and the Red Wings. Red Wings starting to surprise us a little bit. They won 2-1 against the San Jose Sharks in a 4-3 6-round shootout at Little Caesars Arena. Yeah, I get it. Tomas Tatar had a hell of a goal. That's usually what he does. That was in round 5. So it was not the game winner because Mrazek allowed a tricky goal. And then Justin Abdelkader appeared to get the game-winning shootout goal by making a move. The Red Wings most of the Red Wings shooters had scouted Martin Jones very well in the shootout after a 65-minute goaltenders duel. Then they went at the Carolina Hurricanes and just smashed them 4-1 at PNC Arena. Then they allowed a game-winning goal in regulation with 7.7 seconds left in the third period at the Florida Panthers 3-2. Jonathan Huberdeau with the game-winning goal, which thankfully stops the Red Wings' so-called comeback at a playoff spot. Don't even get me started on that one. Don't get any of us at the Michigan Sports Truth started on that. The Red Wings still 4th worst in the Eastern Conference after just barely after Montreal. The Canadiens shellacked the Ottawa Senators 4-1 in Montreal's Sunday afternoon before the Super Bowl kicked off. And let me look at the standings right now. The Red Wings appear to be still 4th worst in the East.
Yeah, I mean, after the division leaders, it gets pretty murky. You're talking about in the Atlantic, they're 17 points behind the Maple Leafs for 3rd place. So, in the Atlantic, you can pretty much give up any sort of hope that they're going to sneak in with a playoff berth on that side. They are 8 points back in the wild card. They're behind the Blue Jackets, the Islanders right now, who are tied for the wild card lead. There is nobody in the Metropolitan Division that is behind the Red Wings. So the Red Wings right now, when you look at the standings, yeah, they are even with the Panthers at 50 points in the Atlantic Division. But then you go to the other side of the ledger, the Metropolitan Division. The worst team in the Metro right now is the Rangers, and they have 55 points. So the Red Wings, when you're talking about the playoffs, is that age-old argument. They say, oh, we're so close. Well, you've got 6 teams to jump before you're even getting into the wild card. And so you have to bank on, are you playing better than those teams? And that's where it gets real sticky, because you can try to make a case that they're real close. That is, by the numbers, true. They're only 8 points out of the wild card, which is not an insurmountable margin. But the fact is you have to jump 6 teams to get there. And that's going to be the toughest point, because you have to bank on all of those teams playing terribly and you playing extremely well in order to be able to jump those 8 points and those 6 teams. So, again, the people that say that the Red Wings are close to a playoff spot, you're not close, because you have to jump all of those teams. And the trade deadline is fast approaching, and it's going to be very interesting to see what moves the Red Wings make, because to the naked eye, it seems as like they're close.
Technically, who they give away as they prepare to sell.
Right. I mean, they're a long way off from a playoff position. And, you got 2 other teams that are tied with you right now that you have to hope that they play just as poorly so that you can jump ahead of the standings. So they really have pretty much 8 teams to deal with. Even though they're 8 points out of the playoff spot, they have 8 teams to deal with to be able to make that jump. So it just doesn't seem plausible. It's not impossible, but it just does not seem plausible at this point for them to make the playoffs. So at that point, you have to decide who they trade and who do they make available. And a lot of reports saying that a lot of guys are available. Mike Green, Peter Mrazek, maybe Jimmy Howard. Pretty much anybody that doesn't have the last name Mark and Matt there at Tennessee is going to be made available at this point. So we'll see what that brings down the road. But for right now, speculation can run rampant because there aren't going to be a lot of moves made until probably the week after next. And then we'll start to see some things trickle in. Sometimes you have a team that jumps the gun and makes a big deal before everybody else has the chance to assess where they're at. And those are the type of deals that sometimes get the things in motion for the rest of the trade deadline to start happening. But as we've seen in a couple of years past, a lot of the biggest deals aren't made on trade deadline day. They're typically made a day or two before. And so those teams can get a jump on it and get those players that they're adding into the fold and get them, into the team fabric and really get them, even if it's a couple of days, get them in and really start to see what they have. It'll be interesting to see who the Red Wings are going to be able to trade and what teams are willing to give up for those players. It's going to be very interesting to see what other teams are doing because obviously there's just one team. This is not a vacuum. There's a lot of teams. You have the Las Vegas Golden Knights who right now are at 74 points, 1 point shy of the Lightning for the best record overall. And, for an expansion team, obviously the home ice advantage is huge for the Las Vegas Golden Knights. But in the playoffs, you also have to go on the road. And that's where their Achilles heel is going to come. So they're going to be looking to add guys that can help them out in that regard. Obviously, veterans are going to be able to help them win some of those tight playoff games on the road.
Yeah, I can't wait for the Red Wings to play the Vegas Golden Knights at Little Caesars Arena. That'll be the first trip to Detroit for Vegas.
Yeah, early in the season, Detroit went out there and beat the Las Vegas Golden Knights, which was the only home loss they had for so long before they were met with their second loss at home. But that was relatively early in the season, and it's a completely different dynamic now. So it looks like the Las Vegas Golden Knights actually won't make that visit until March 8th. A lot can change in between now and then.
Wow.
Trade deadline will have passed.
2 more months away. Oh, boy. Can't wait.
So, to talk about that game right now, there's going to be a lot of guys that could potentially be on the move. And when the Golden Knights come to town finally in March, you could be looking at a completely different Red Wings team.
Yeah. The Knights are hungry for revenge. Even they can't wait. But that being said, the Wings are home against the Boston Bruins Tuesday at 7:30, at the New York Islanders Friday at 7, and then at the Washington Capitals Sunday at 3. That's a tough team the Red Wings ought to lose to in regulation. So,
yeah, they have the Bruins tomorrow, and then they have the Islanders, who last time they played the Islanders, they beat them pretty well. And then, as you mentioned before, they have the Capitals on Sunday, and again, on paper, doesn't look good for the Red Wings, but that's why they play the games. And again, they start to take shape as far as who they're going to make available and who they're going to be looking at to hold on to. And those are the types of games that can really drive up some value for some guys. So, kind of hope for some isolated success with some guys, but you also hope that if you're the Red Wings fans, when you're looking for them to really start that rebuild, you're hoping that they come out on the short end, but you hope that there's some guys that have some isolated success and help them with their trade values.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So that's Red Wings. Now we get down to some Lions stuff.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
The official hiring of Matt Patricia as the new head coach comes into fruition. Before that, the Lions hire 3 assistant coaches. Jeff Davidson as an offensive line coach. He worked with Matt Patricia in 2004 as a tight ends coach, while Patricia was an offensive assistant. George Godsey as a quarterbacks coach. That's number 2. Worked with Patricia from 2011 to 2013 as an offensive assistant and then tight ends coach. And then number 3, third and final, Brian Stewart as defensive backs coach. He was connected with Patricia at Syracuse in the college level in 2001 with the then Orangemen, now Orange, in the same position. So to sum it all up, all 3 of these assistant coaches that the Lions just recently hired are connected to Matt Patricia. Now, connecting to Super Bowl 52, I get it. The Patriots defense just couldn't stop the Eagles offense. They gave up 39 points. 39-31 was the final. The Eagles finally won their first ever Super Bowl. Congratulations to them. I tip my hat to them, but at the same time, ESPN has been pitching out this silly, stupid question. Do Lions fans feel bad about hiring Matt Patricia? No. I'll tell you why. He's not to blame. The players are to blame because they missed too many tackles and they missed a lot of coverages on secondary defenders. Matt Patricia tried his best to make some play calls.
I mean, if you're going to,
and they even got fooled by a Doug Peterson tricky play call on 4th and goal.
Yeah,
in that first half.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to gauge what the Lions have hired based on one game, yes, it was the Super Bowl, and yes, it was Matt Patricia at the 4, because he's the defensive coordinator that is partially responsible for the record output that the Philadelphia Eagles were able to put up. To put out the question, do Lions fans feel bad that you're hiring him? It's kind of a silly question because, number one, he hasn't coached a game in Detroit. Number 2, he's going to have a completely different cast of players that he's going to have to deal with in Detroit. So it's a really uneven comparison, and I think that if you're going to say, well, we shouldn't hire him based on the Super Bowl, he was in the Super Bowl. Your team didn't even make the playoffs. So
right.
You're hoping that he can bring the team to that next level, and if you're the Lions, you should be happy
right
that he's coming to town because he's going to bring a air of confidence, and also he's been there before. And
right, can I add one more reason real quick? They played the one-loss Philadelphia Eagles, who finished 50. I can't remember their regular season record, but I think they finished with one regular season loss. Since then, they've rolled. Even without Carson Wentz, for God's sakes, Nick Foles became their MVP.
Yeah, they ended up at 14-2.
14-2.
And the last game of the last
2
game of the
lost.
regular season
Thank you.
was basically a throwaway game against the Cowboys because they had already clinched home field advantage. They felt compelled to reveal nothing as far as their game plan was concerned. Yes, they did struggle against the Falcons offensively in the first round. Then they pummeled the Vikings in the NFC Championship, and then continued that offensive thrust in the Super Bowl. So you're not talking about a team that is at any means deficient or inferior. And yes, the Patriots did not play well defensively. But again, the attention should be what Matt Patricia can do for the Lions, because the Lions defense is atrocious. They're not good. And if you're bringing in a guy to shore that up, you want to find a guy that has been in a successful atmosphere such as Matt Patricia. So it's really just the speculation has finally been brought to an end as he was announced as the head coach. That said, you can't base your hire on one game. And obviously, Matt Patricia, there were some issues with that defense all year. They gave up a lot of yards. They gave up a lot of plays in between the 20s. But when it came down to the red zone, they were able to tighten the screws. And if you look at just the way that Lions play defense, it is not even close to what Matt Patricia is going to have in store for them. And he's obviously going to have some personnel differences, and he's going to have some guys he can work with. He's also going to have an opportunity now in free agency and the draft to bring in more guys that are going to suit his system. So at this point, you just have no idea what he's going to be able to do. But Bob Quinn got his guy. He got the person that he believes can take them to the next level. And the Super Bowl loss yesterday shouldn't take anything away from what Matt Patricia is going to be able to bring to the table for the Detroit Lions.
Can hardly wait until August. But not to mention the NFL draft.
I mean, it's going to be, well, yeah, I mean, you're going to have the draft as well, and
free agency.
Hiring a defensively minded coach with the depth that is at the defensive positions in this draft. It's going to be very tempting for them to upgrade in that way. And they have a lot of younger players that they feel that they can also mold and get in to Matt Patricia's system. So, yeah, I mean, they've hired the right guy. It's not been a well-kept secret. They finally just made it official today. And, again, it's too tough to tell right now what he's going to be able to do, because that roster is going to look completely different than it did at the end of the season.
Yep. So the other Lions story, former Lions wide receiver Titus Young Jr., according to the LA Times, was opening up about a mental health issue. He was having a bipolar disorder and undergoing CTE symptoms. He was rehabbing after his prison sentencing in April 2017. That was last year, after he got in a fight the year before in 2016. And he also got back in like a few years earlier, 2013, when he got released by the Lions. I think he got at least maybe around 2012 when he got in a fight with Louis Delmas during his Lions tenure as a wide receiver. So I handed this article for you guys to read privately in our private group chat on Facebook Messenger, which we use here on live air on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio during our weekend review editions here on the Michigan Sports Truth podcast. He's not sure what causes mental illness. According to the Times, Young wrote that he believes that he has his mental health in order and should be released, try to make a return to the NFL. He's getting, there may be signs that he's getting better from his mental health issues. He's trying to rehab. He's trying to rehab as hard as he can to try to make a return and not call it quits for good.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL, it's all about the comeback, and there's always a market for people that have proven that they can play at the NFL level. And even though he's had some mental health issues and some trouble with the law, there's always teams looking for help. And it's happened before, and it'll happen again, where guys with checkered pasts are brought into a team to try to prove that they have gotten past those issues and are able to play the game of football. I think the biggest red flag for me is that he's still got to get paroled, number one. So he has to convince the parole board that he is able to function in society. And after that, he's going to have to work out, get in game shape, get in front of coaches in private workouts, and show what he's able to do. And I don't think it's a question of his ability. I mean, I don't think he's a great NFL player, but he obviously had the talent to be drafted and play some games. And it's going to be all the off-the-field stuff that teams are going to be worried about. And the NFL is not just simply about can you play the game anymore. It has really changed to what are you going to do off the field that doesn't embarrass embarrass us as a team? What are you going to do to make sure that you don't upset the chemistry and the fabric of the locker room? And that's going to be a question that you can only answer by putting him on that team and finding out. And like I said, there's usually no shortage of teams that are willing to do so in the NFL. There are teams that truly will go for help, and if they find it, they're going to go to some guys that may have checkered pasts and questions about their ability to function within the fabric of the team. And that's what he's going to have to fight. I don't think he's going to have to he's going to have to prove that he is athletically able to play in the NFL. It's going to be the mental side and all the off-the-field stuff that he's going to have to deal with. And you're going to have to really look deep into your team and find out if you have a structure and a culture in place that's going to allow him the accommodations that are going to be needed for him to succeed. So it's kind of it was a good story. It's kind of a long read, but if you do take the time to do it, I would just say that was one of the things in my mind that kept coming back is you can tell me that you have all these issues and that you fixed them, but we're not going to be able to know that until you get back into the outside world, until you get into the public eye. Is it going to turn back into your old habits, or have you really changed? And again, nobody will know that until he's actually given the opportunity. So we'll see if that does happen. There's a lot of moving parts that have to happen before that even becomes a reality. But it was just, like you said, a story of interest because he was a former Lion. And, I hope he gets everything right with his mind, regardless if he plays in the NFL again, because mental illness is a very tough and lengthy process to get through. And if he's able to do that, regardless if he plays the NFL again, you hope he gets everything fixed in that aspect. But for teams to say that, for him to say that he wants to come back, there's a lot of hurdles he's going to have to clear before he's able to do that.
Yeah. Only time will tell. Very complicated story. The medication that I almost forgot to mention that is named Seroquel or Seroquel or something. Seroquel. The drug is sometimes used to treat bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. So that's the medication that Titus Young Jr. is taking while rehabbing. Just to let you people know out there.
And when you're talking about something like that, I mean, there's reams of material on guys that they seem good for a while, but as soon as they stop taking medication, stop their treatment, it's back to square one. And that's what you have to be wary of, regardless of which team is going to sign him. You have to make sure that somebody's making sure that he is on the right path. And NFL teams are all about living distraction. Whether he's good or not is one thing. Whether he's able to stay on the right path and continue his treatment is another. And sometimes that's just too much of a headache for teams to undertake. We'll see where it leads. But right now he's still incarcerated, so he's going to have to get through the parole board in a month or so. And if he's able to do that, then he's going to have to work out. He's going to have to make sure that he's in top shape so that he can get some workouts and get some teams interested, and then you go from there. So, as I mentioned before, a lot of moving parts, but again, it's just one of those stories as an interest to Lions fans that kind of wonder what happened to him, and now you know.
Right. I also forgot to mention the Lions have retained offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter. So I believe slight change of plans on 5 questions. That's gonna be included there too. So speaking of which, I believe we might have a slight change of plans on question number 1. I still have been thinking about it, but anyway, we got what's your grade segment coming up, but I think I think I'll leave question 1 as is, as I messaged it to you earlier. So let's just get 5 questions over with.
It's time for 5 questions on the Michigan Sports Truth.
Without further ado, question number 1. Are Tom Izzo and Travis Walton still lying? Of course they are.
Yeah, Travis Walton, probably a little bit easier to pinpoint that, simply because there's a lot more facts at hand that point to his activities and transgressions. For Tom Izzo, it's a little bit harder to pin down because you have to find out what he was aware of, when he was made aware, what the situation was. And I've said this multiple times on this podcast that until all the facts are in front of you, it's very difficult to make a decision. So I think that Travis Walton, really a lot of the evidence points to him doing those things, and the plea deal that he took, which is apparently something that happens with a lot of people in East Lansing, those types of offenses. For him to say that he doesn't remember anything other than the accuser throwing a drink in his face, there's multiple accounts of people saying that something otherwise had happened. Like I said, but for Tom Izzo, it's a lot harder to pin it on him because you don't know when he was told or what he was told, and that still has to be rooted out. So I don't know if he's lying. Sometimes it's lying by omission, and that's going to be the hardest thing to prove.
Yeah, it's a very cool atmosphere in East Lansing, I tell you, and it continues to be.
Next question.
Question number 2. Can the Central Michigan Chippewas make a comeback, or finish a comeback, rather, in the MAC West standings? Well, they're already making a comeback in the progress, or process, whichever you call it, of making a comeback in the MAC West standings. It's got to be tough for them to finish it, though. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I just don't know if they're going to have enough time, if they're going to have enough gas to be able to do that, because the teams that are ahead of them right now, when you look at the schedule that Central Michigan has left, it's going to be a real difficult task for them to make that complete comeback and end up on top. Stranger things have happened. But I think that when you look at the balance of that schedule and the teams that they're going to have to overcome, you've got Toledo right now sitting at 8-2. You have to hope that they also fall flat on their face. And it's the same thing I said with the Red Wings situation. It's not that Central Michigan can't get on a winning streak. It's the fact that they're going to have to hope that Toledo hits the skids and really goes down the drain, because right now Central Michigan is 4 games back. So not only does Toledo have to play terribly the last 8 to 10 games, but you have to play impeccably. So, not that Central Michigan can't go on a run, but it's the fact that Toledo, at the top, probably isn't going to go winless or only win 1 game the rest of the way.
They're too good. They're way too good to do so. Question number 3.
Next question.
Question number 3, and this is just me personally. Now that the Pistons no longer have Boban Marjanovic as their backup center, and this is the only position that we're pinpointing. I know they need to fill other positions, though, but who should they pick up by the trade deadline or in the offseason as a new backup center? Remember, you can't have a reserve center like Willie Reed, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I mean, right now they've got Eric Borland, who is technically the backup center. And when you look at the free
He didn't even play tonight.
No, and there's not a lot of room for him to get a lot of minutes in the front court now with Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. Dan Van Gundy doesn't really like to limit himself to having guys shoehorn into positions, so to speak. But I think that when you're looking at a backup center role, you're going to have to spend wisely, and you're going to have to do it with limited resources, because there's a lot of other positions that they're going to have to fill. A guy that they could look at, toward the lower end of the spectrum, guys like Jaleel Okafor, who right now is on the Nets. You have other guys that are going to be potentially free agents as well. Nerlens Noel from the Dallas Mavericks. He's a really good defensive center.
There we go.
He doesn't have a whole lot of offense going, but he could be somebody that could fit in. He's not really an expensive player. Right now he's making $4.2 million. But again, it really depends on what the market will bear, what teams are going to be going after players of that ilk and of that price range. So for me, those would be the two guys that I would look at, simply because they would fit that backup center type of role where they're offensively limited. They don't have a lot of offensive game, but they can lock down defensively. I would say Nerlens Noel by far is the superior player of the two, but you're going to have to look at the guy. I mean, you're not going to get an all-star. You're getting a backup center.
Right.
So I think that
that's all you need.
If they had to make a move, those are some of the guys that maybe. And again, I don't know what the market's going to bear for free agent backup centers, but I think that if you're looking at guys that can be had relatively cheaply, and I don't know what Pistons salary cap situation is going to look like, but Nerlens Noel fits that mold to me perfectly as a defensive stopper with limited offensive ability and can play limited altered minutes and do the job when your starter is not on the floor. So if you're going to ask me, in a perfect world, Nerlens Noel would probably be a target. But again, I don't know what the Pistons are going to look at and what money or resources they're going to have to allocate now that they have Blake Griffin on the squad and their cap situation has changed dramatically. So it remains to be seen what happens. But those would be two guys that you could look at, again, playing limited minutes that could at least help you defensively. And that's really what you're looking for. When you're putting a guy in as a backup center in the NBA, you're not hoping that he can really string together some big offensive games, because that's not why they're there. That's why they're the backup.
Right. So, and here are the stats to prove it. Nerlens Noel, this season 4 points per game, but does 0.6 blocks per game. Career stats 9.5 points per game, 7.2 rebounds per game, 4.1 this season, and 1.4 blocks per game. This is as far as the backup center, it doesn't have to be that big. Defense is the name of the game, and this is a really good pick. So we're gonna have to pull for the Pistons somehow to pick him up and use him as a backup center that can actually play a lot of defense, or at least some.
Next question.
Question number 4. How far can the Pistons go with Blake Griffin on their side? Let's have a little fun with this, but let's be accurate.
Well, how far can they go? Right now they're 3-0 or 4-0, however we want to look at it since the trade. How far can they go? It really is going to depend on the surrounding players, though. I think Reggie Jackson still being out of the lineup is going to limit their ability to some degree. I think that when he comes back, that's when you're really going to see what they're able to do. But how far can they go? Well, in the East, they're all the way back up to 9th. Those two lengthy losing streaks really have kneecapped them as far as being able to get much higher than that. But I don't want to say the sky is the limit, because there's obviously a lot of teams that are going to be having something to say about that. But as I mentioned before in the Pistons segment, they're playing a lot of teams coming up here down the stretch that they could potentially see in the playoffs. So those games become automatic measuring sticks, simply because if they get into the playoffs, chances are they're going to be playing some of those teams. And that's where we're going to really find out when they play the teams like the Raptors, the Cavs, the Celtics, with a full complement of players, what they have in the tank. And I don't think that the Pistons should limit themselves with Blake Griffin to say, okay, we just need to make the playoffs. Because that's not a move that you make just to get in the playoffs. That's a move that you're making to really start to assert yourself and try to become a player in the Eastern Conference. So the upside for that is that they've definitely improved themselves for the short term, but I just don't think it's enough for them to overtake teams like Boston and Cleveland and Toronto in 7-game series.
Right. And finally,
Next question.
question number 5, and I'm going to wing it. How can new head coach Matt Patricia and Lions offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter work together to improve the Lions offense? Because the Lions offense was pretty bad on red zone scoring opportunities. They didn't score many touchdowns.
Well, they were terrible. So
No,
I think that with Jim Bob Cooter coming back, there's going to be a lot of speculation. A lot of people think that he shouldn't have been retained. But yet he has been. And I think that really for him, that was one of the things that, my speaker went off there. I think that for him to come back doesn't necessarily mean that Matt Patricia really wants him to be there. But at the same time, it also gives them some continuity and some familiar faces in the locker room. And I think that what it really says about him being retained is that Matt Patricia doesn't want to come in and just clean house, because as bad as the Lions were offensively in the red zone, they did some good things. And I think that not being around Jim Caldwell, being around Matt Patricia, he could be encouraged to be more aggressive. And as we saw that in the Super Bowl, and we saw that in the playoffs, the teams that were more aggressive benefited. Doug Peterson went for it on 4th and goal, and they went for it on 4th down a couple of times in that game, and they were able to convert. So being aggressive really is the name of the game. And I think that with Jim Caldwell at the helm of the Lions, Jim Bob Cooter may not have been allowed to be as creative or be as aggressive as he personally prefers to be. So we'll see what happens. I think this is a 1-year trial for Jim Bob Cooter and the rest of the Lions offense. And if he doesn't get it done, then Matt Patricia can bring in his own guy and start to mold his offense from there. I think that as a new head coach, you want to bring all your guys in, but at the same time, I don't think that Matt Patricia is necessarily down on Jim Bob Cooter. I think that he and Bob Quinn probably had that conversation probably multiple times about Jim Bob Cooter being retained. And I think that overall, what it says is that he is willing to give Jim Bob Cooter a chance. But I think that if they're able to be more aggressive and take the reins off, so to speak, and they have some success, then it can be a win. And it also gives the offense a familiar face to work with. They don't have to change everything. And for all their red zone foibles this year, like I said, they're between the 20s, the Lions were fantastic, but they just never could punch it into the end zone. And a lot of that was due to the play calling, in my opinion, because they weren't able to do the things that some of the other teams were doing around the league. And we'll see if Jim Bob Cooter has the reins taken off, what he's able to do. If he fails, well, we'll know that it wasn't just Jim Caldwell's influence. It was a little bit more deeply rooted. And if they do have some success, it may be very well attributed to the fact that Matt Patricia is going to let him kind of run his own thing and kind of stay out of his way. And again, we won't know exactly what we're going to get until we get to training camp and after all the cuts are made and who's hurt, who's not. But I just think that there's a lot of factors that people aren't taking into account that may have not been Jim Bob Cooter's doing. I don't think he's a terrible offensive coordinator. And Matt Patricia, I'm sure, talked to Bob Quinn at length about other guys that he could bring in. And after having those conversations, they felt the best move was to keep Jim Bob Cooter where he was at, and they'll give him a 1-year trial run.
That is fair enough. So, that wraps up our 5 questions segment. And then to our entire audience, if you want to answer those 5 questions, just replay that segment portion of this episode and answer them the best you can without going out of line.
Pencils down, everyone. It's time to find out what's your grade.
A handful of events to grade here. First off in chronological order or segue order. Michigan State University hiring John Engler, former State of Michigan governor, as the school's interim president.
Well, this is a tough one because all the previous history that John Engler has had and the optics of this hire don't seem to mesh, simply because he hasn't had a great record when it comes to the types of situations that Michigan State is currently dealing with. That said, I think he's going to recognize his job, and his job is going to be make Michigan State University, not just the football and the basketball team, but the entire university, accountable for the actions and the lines of communication that there are. And as somebody who has worked in a government situation such as John Engler, he understands that. That said, like I said, the optics don't mesh. A lot of people were upset that he was hired due to his previous record with sexual assault cases and his attitude towards them. My grade for this right now is a C-, simply because
Same here.
Even though he may be a good hire, right now on the face, it doesn't look like the right move simply because of what he brings to the table. And that is a history of having a relatively lax attitude towards the type of situations, albeit at a smaller scale, than Michigan State is undergoing right now. So I don't think it's going to be something that you can make an off-the-hip grade of simply just based on his previous history. But the C- is there simply because I think that they could have done a better job of perhaps finding somebody that has a different stance, or at least has a history of being the opposite of where they're at right now. So I'm going to give it a C- because I don't think it's a complete failure, but I really am anxious and curious to see where he'll steer the university in these times.
That's event number one. Event number two, the Pistons trading for Blake Griffin. They trade Avery Bradley, Tobias Harris, and Boban Marjanovic and 2 draft picks for Griffin and 2 reserves.
Yeah, on the face of this, when you look at the players that were traded for him, you think, boy, they gave up a lot. But Tobias Harris was up he was going to be a free agent. Avery Bradley was going to be a free agent. And I think the kicker for me was the draft pick. I don't know what the deal was and what the inner workings were, obviously. But
the first-round draft pick, wasn't it?
That first-round draft pick seems a little bit much, especially given the limited protection that it was afforded. Basically, what it did is they pretty much cemented it for this year's draft. Because the Pistons, I don't think, are going to fall completely on their faces and finish in the top 3 of the lottery, or at least have the chance to fall there. Obviously, the lottery, the odds are going to be in their favor.
They're most certainly not going to tank. No, they got Blake Griffin.
Right, so you're basically saying we're going to give you a first-round pick in this year's draft, which seems to be very deep. And for a team that has a lot of holes and a lot of things that they can improve, it doesn't seem wise to give away a first-round draft pick. But on the flip side, Dan Gundy hasn't drafted well. And so maybe taking that out of his quiver of arrows, so to speak, maybe they're trying to say that, hey, we may not necessarily trust this draft pick being with us, so we'll give it to you, and we'll go ahead and take Blake's contract and see if we can't fill around the edges with other free agents. Because at this point, Pistons don't look like they're going to have a first-round draft pick, so they're going to have to force some of those players that Stan Van Gundy has drafted in the past and the guys that they've picked up on free agent contracts and make it work. Like I said, their chips are all in for this year. And they're going to have to find some way to make it work. And in free agency in the offseason, they're going to have to find some ways to fill those holes. And they may make more trades in the offseason. We don't know what's going to happen with the rest of the regular season in the playoffs. But right now they're kind of limiting themselves to what they have on hand, and then venturing out to free agency to fill those holes, which can be dangerous at times, given what the market will bear for the positions that you're looking to fill. But my grade for this trade overall, I think I'm going to give it a solid B, because it does give the Pistons some new life. It does breathe some excitement into the fan base. And on the short term, it's probably going to work. In the long term, obviously time will tell, but it really kind of limits their options. And they're going to have to kind of sink or swim with the guy that they have and hope they can find a couple of free agent gems to unearth and fill the holes that they've created, or that they perceive to have been created with this trade and all the other personnel moves they've made over the last couple of years.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm going to have to give it a B minus, pending all the points that you delivered with that trade, on that trade. And then finally, event number 3, the Lions officially hiring Matt Patricia as their new head coach. Again, the Super Bowl 52 was not his fault. Again, it was the players. Besides, Matt Patricia, like you pointed out, is going to have to deal with new faces in Detroit like Darius Slay, Glover Quinn Jr., Ziggy Ansah, Travis Swanson, Nevin Lawson.
Yeah, I think the
and offensive guys like Glover Quinn, Matt Stafford, Golden Tate Jr., etc.
Yeah, obviously with the return of Jim Bob Cooter and the hiring of Matt Patricia, there are going to be some changes. They're going to find out in the draft who they were able to get. They're going to have free agency coming up, so there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Matt Patricia to mold the team to his liking. But if you're going to grade it on one game's performance, then I just don't know what I can tell you. The grade I'm going to give this right now is an A, simply because this is the guy that they wanted. This is the guy that they cast their lot with early in the coaching search. They obviously couldn't make it official until the Patriots were done playing. But regardless if they would have done this 3 weeks ago, if they would have done it today, it was going to get an A rating simply because they feel that he can bring this team to the next level. And to get the guy in there that has had success as a coordinator and has been around the Patriots organization for as long as he has, you would hope that he is able to bring some of those same attributes and values to the Detroit Lions. And you don't win by hiring the safe play. And Jim Caldwell, when they first hired him, was the safe play. And when Bob Quinn retained him this year, it was a safe play. And it felt like they were just kind of putting off having to find a new coach until Bob Quinn was able to get the guy that he really wanted. And I'm sure that he had targets if they didn't retain Jim Caldwell after last season. But they stuck with him. They got what they paid for, and they had to let him go because he had gotten the Lions to the point that he could do no more. And now bringing in Matt Patricia, they feel that no, this is the next level. You bring in somebody that has had success, has been around a winning organization for pretty much his entire career.
Especially the Patriots.
And your hope is now that he can bring some of that with him. The past record on the Bill Belichick coaching tree is pretty bad. Guys like Romeo Cannell, Charlie Weiss, Josh McDaniels, Mike Vrabel was hired as the Tennessee Titans head coach. So we'll see where that goes. So the Bill Belichick coaching tree, it doesn't necessarily mean success. But I think that with Matt Patricia, the one difference with him is that he is an open-minded individual that is open to a lot of different things that other coaches won't try. And I don't think that he'll go conventional route on a lot of things. And as I said before, aggression has been rewarded this year. And I think that that's the trend that you have to look at is you gotta go for it. You can't punt on 4th and 1 from your opponent's 40-yard line. You go for it. You can't make the safe play and make sure you get the 3 points sometimes. You sometimes have to go for the throat. And as we saw in the Super Bowl, the team that did that ended up winning. And I think that Matt Patricia, now having learned that, as well as the other experience that he has, is going to bring that to the Lions. And whether it works or not will remain to be seen. But it's going to be something starkly in contrast to the coaches that the Lions have had over the past 8 or 9 seasons. I mean, Jim Caldwell was the definitive conservative coach. And before that, they had Jim Schwartz, who was, for all of his defensive prowess, very bad at managing the offensive side of the football. And it cost them. And I think that...
especially with their collapse in 2013.
Yeah, I mean, for the Lions to move forward, they have to get somebody in there that understands that doing things the conventional way sometimes is not the best way. It may be the most proven and have the largest sample size, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way. So that's why I'm giving this an A, is simply because I don't think Matt Patricia is going to fall victim to the same maladies that other Lions coaches have had, which is going by the book and going by the numbers and making their decisions based on the tried and true method that they've had for the length of their careers.
I'm going to give it a mid-range A as well, because it's time for Matt Patricia to lead his Lions to at least one playoff win, maybe a little bit more than that. It's time for the Lions to start progressing, especially with him at their helm. So that's our What's Your Grade segment. So for our audience, if they have a grade for each of those 3 events, post them in the comment bank in this episode, and please don't go out of line. Well, almost an hour and 3/4 in the can, and that's episode 302 of the Week in Review. Before we sign off, we want to remind everyone to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media and have their friends share that as well, because we want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast is searching for a wider local audience that is fans of sports. So please spread the word about the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast and its Facebook page. It's on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, TalkShoe, and Blog Talk Radio, even, only for special reports. So, Buck, Geno, very thorough job as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Very good.
Absolutely. So, I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips, and Buck Geno at Buck Geno III, 3 I's for Roman numerals. And like and share the Michigan Sports Truth Facebook page, most importantly. We'll talk to you next week in episode 303. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
And mission complete.